So hi, I'm Josh, Joshua Selesnik, but I go by Josh. I work here at Expium specifically as a team building and personal development consultant. I work with teams, both our own teams and external teams, on developing them, their rapport, repertoire, their social skills, and kind of the basis of how the team functions. A lot of what I talk about is things like working agreements and trust. So I do that. I'm also a certified safe Scrum Master, and I'm certified as a Myers-Briggs facilitator, which is pretty cool. The personality system, I can work people through that and help them discover their type. Lastly, I'm a game master, which I'll talk about a bit later on, but basically I use games as a part of my methodology for building trust on a team. So that's who I am. I want to talk a little bit about why we're here today. So I am here for you to help you make your meetings more exciting. That's maybe not too hard to do, I don't know. But really, I'm here to teach you the value of saying something uncomfortable in a meeting, something that another team member might disagree with, and how by saying that thing and engaging in the discussion that follows, you will produce better results on your team. By doing that, the best ideas will rise to the top through debate and interrogation, and you can discover a kind of alignment on your team that would not have been possible before. So that's what we're here to talk about today. Before I go any further with you guys, I would be doing a disservice if I didn't introduce the company that I work with, Expium, Valiantis company. Expium is a platinum solution partner of Atlassian, the tool system, and that means that we partner with them to help enable users with their products. So we do that with a couple of different services. The first is training, like Jira Bootcamp, which is our flagship course, which is a 3-day deep dive into Jira, which is really great if you're a Jira administrator or a super user and you want to get much more familiar with what the system is capable of. And we also have boot camps for Confluence and Jira Service Management. And outside of the Atlassian things, we also now offer workshops geared towards helping your teams work better together. I'll talk more about that later. Essentially, Expium offers consulting across the entire Atlassian suite of products for a wide range of organizations that are both large and small, and their teams. So that's who we are, that's what we do. Also, regarding the solutions that we provide, it's really important to note that we have an entire team of full stack developers who create custom software. So if something doesn't exist yet, we can build it. All right, that's who we are. Thank you, nice to meet you. So where does conflict fit in, given all of that? Well, this is who we are, this is our company. During the pandemic, we began to develop this team building and enablement arm because we found that our culture was in distress. So this is a shot of our office in St. Louis, Missouri. It's a great place. To the right, you can see tables. That's where we do lunch as a company. And it's much bigger than that. There's kind of a whole room there. You can see there's the offices. What we used to have was an environment where we would all take lunch at the same time at noon, and that was kind of a company cultural tradition. So everyone would take a break and go and hang out in the lunchroom or the dining room, whatever you want to call this, meeting room, and talk. And sometimes it would be about work, sometimes it would be about other things, but it built this culture of camaraderie and like person-to-person understanding that made a big difference, and I think made us uniquely capable and successful. Our culture was both capable and open, while also being one that really focused on collaboration and people talking and exercising different ideas. It was low stakes in a way, but it was also very productive. So when the pandemic hit, we found ourselves in a crisis because that went away. All of a sudden, relationships and connections throughout the company started to disintegrate or disappear, and people who used to talk every day would go 6 or 7 months without really talking. theoretically, we knew that we had the technology to be able to do something about that. I mean, we had Zoom, we had Google Meet, but there was something missing that had been there before that we couldn't quite figure out how to get back. We were also hiring people from around the world, and they never even really had a chance to experience what the Expium culture was like. So we started to wonder, like, is it ever going to be like it was beforehand? Is there any way we can foster that same atmosphere? So we turned to the literature. Specifically, we pulled out a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which we know is about creating teams that know how to collaborate and that can work through any problem together. So this got us curious about how we can improve our teamwork for ourselves and eventually for our customers. So for this next section, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the 5 dysfunctions of a team as a book and as a theory. But I would like you, if you're listening, to ask any questions that you have. This may not be like other webinars that you've been to in the past. I actually, as I dig into this theory, I want to hear your, yeah, but what about this? Or your, how about that's in the chat? Because I'm talking about the application of this. And if you're engaged and intelligent, you're probably going to start to have questions about, well, does that actually make sense? Does this theory actually work? Does it apply? And those questions, I think, are incredibly productive. So you can put any questions or thoughts or reflections into the Q&A chat, and it's totally private, so only I will see it, but it will really enrich our discussion as I go forward. So 5 dysfunctions of a team. This is structured as a pyramid here because it's intended to show that each one builds on the one below it. So at the bottom of the pyramid, you have an absence of trust. If there's an absence of trust, none of the things above it are going to function. And likewise, fear of conflict, etc. So absence of trust means that team members don't feel that they can be open or honest with each other, that it's an environment where it's not really safe to be vulnerable, where you might be judged or might lose your job if you admit to doing something poorly. So an environment with an absence of trust makes it is a key dysfunction and makes it very hard to build a team that is committed, that can engage in productive conflict, and that can hold each other accountable in a meaningful way. So that's the bottom. With trust established, it then becomes possible to leverage that trust. Yeah, so trust is there as a foundation, but it's there to give us a springboard that we can go towards. And it's a springboard into engaging in productive conflict. Productive conflict is conflict that's not about winning or losing. It's not about trying to force your idea through. It's conflict about the ideas themselves. It's an ideological debate, a passionate debate, hopefully, where people are considering the different merits, and the fear of engaging in that conflict often holds teams back and will create sort of like a false sense of consensus where everyone's going along with something, but they might have disagreements that they're afraid to voice. After that, we would have a lack of commitment. This is the team fully being aligned on what they're going to commit to, either their goals, their practices. This can apply to tons of different areas in your team. There could be various things that you would want your team to commit to. And well, it's definitely possible to get commitment through use of force and through telling people, just do it because I say so. The kind of commitment I'm talking about here is the kind of commitment where the team members feel committed in themselves in a wholehearted way. Above that is the avoidance of accountability. It can be hard to hold each other accountable when we fall short, and it can be uncomfortable to do that. So some teams will avoid doing that. Not now. And then at the very top is an inattention to results, which is simply looking at your statistics and seeing if you're actually hitting your numbers. So those are the 5 dysfunctions. And we're going to dig in a little bit today into the fear of conflict. So I want to start by giving you a definition of what I mean by conflict here. So conflict is not a war. Conflict is not like a fist fight. It's not a shouting match. It's just an anxious situation that needs to be resolved between two people or between a group. Something that feels like if it doesn't get resolved, it's going to possibly have negative consequences. So let's think about this in terms of a movie. I think you'll enjoy this metaphor. So if we take the example of Star Wars, we can look at the story. The conflict is that the Empire is oppressing the galaxy. So in the very beginning of the movie, we learn that there's a conflict between the rebel forces and the Empire. You see this tiny little ship come out, and you see this big ship come out after it. And it's very clear, like, oh, that's sort of the problem. These people are being oppressed. Going forward, though, the movie, I think, is mostly about Luke Skywalker's conflict, where his home is destroyed. His parents are killed by the Empire. And he needs to decide what to do with his life. And throughout the course of the movie, he goes on a journey where in the beginning, he doesn't think he can do anything. He just wants to escape, to ultimately him embracing the teachings of Obi-Wan Kenobi and fighting for something greater than himself and joining the Rebel Alliance and ultimately destroying the Death Star. So a conflict can be about two people who are in conflict. It can be an internal struggle. It can be two groups of people. It can be just against nature and natural forces. But in all of these cases, something is ultimately at stake. A person's happiness, their ability to find love, their ability to have a successful career. And in our lives, especially on our teams, that might look like the success of your product. It might look like your customers' faith in your brand, or it might look like the proper functioning of a tool. All of those things could ultimately be at stake. And if you make a bad decision on any of those things, it could cost you very severely. The stakes that exist are why you need to be able to have conflict, because there's not any room to make bad decisions. Bad decisions are going to have consequences for your team. Might have a consequence for your career, might have a consequence for the success of a given product that you're working on. Your team knows what they're working on and why it matters. At the end of the day, it's going to impact their daily lives. They're going to be working on different projects, and whether or not they agree with it is actually really important to their motivation on getting it done. Getting our disagreements out in the open can be uncomfortable, but that is what will make meetings exciting. Basically, you'll have people engaging in subjects that are relevant to their daily lives and how the team functions, both in the short and the long term, and it may even alter the course of the team's future. So my question for you is, what if your meetings could grip you as tightly as a great movie does? Well, to do that, it's really important to make everyone aware of what is at stake and the anxious situation that surrounds them. A great film will provoke this conflict right out of the gate, and that is what pulls the audience in and engages us. In Star Wars, we see the opening crawl and the attack going on. We hear about the rebel plans. And movies that don't do that lose us, and we drift off and wonder what we're even watching. So, my advice for you is to present the conflict up front to your team. You know the issue that you're dealing with your teams. You know what the stakes are of what you're dealing with. Present them at the top of your meeting. Explain to your team the danger of making a bad decision and why it's important to come to the best decision you can for the future success of what your team is working on. Maybe the new initiative that you all believe in will fail if it's not given the resources. I've seen that with teams. Or perhaps another group is not being transparent about their practices, so you don't know how to make meaningful decisions, so you need to have a discussion with them and potentially engage in why they don't want to be as transparent. There are many anxious examples, and I don't really need to tell you what keeps you up at night, but I will give an example from the book to help illustrate my point. Now, what's really cool about the 5 dysfunctions of a team is that it's not just a book on the theory. It's actually mostly not about the theory. Most of the book is a story. It's a piece of fiction. It's a fable. And it's the story of a dysfunctional executive team in Silicon Valley that has an amazing product, advantage in the workplace or in the market, and yet is failing to perform against their competitors. And it's the story of a new CEO who joins the team in order to cure it of its problems. And it's a riveting book. So I want to take you into a moment in the story when they're called in for their first offsite. This has been hard fought to get the team there. Many team members have questioned whether or not this is worth their time, have said we have real work to do. This is a waste. A couple of different members of the team have tried to pull out of it, have tried to cancel and say they have other, they need to meet with a client or what have you. And some members of the team are there hoping that it'll work out well, but aren't sure. So in this moment, Catherine walks into the room and sits down in front of everyone there, and she says this. She says, "We have a more experienced and talented executive team than any of our competitors. We have more cash than they do. And thanks to Martin and his team, we have better core technology. And we have a more powerful board of directors. Yet in spite of all of that, we are behind two of our competitors in terms of both revenue and customer growth. Can anyone here tell me why that is?" Silence. And the key that she's talking about here is the team's dysfunctions and what's holding them back. Even though they have all of these things behind them, they're still failing to perform as a team, which is kind of the critical thing. But to the point, teams that participate in passionate debate with each other will make better decisions. Flaws will be presented, new possibilities will be opened up, and creativity is unlocked as the team strives to solve the problem. That's the ideal state for your team to be in. The drama of all that also keeps us engaged and on the edge of our seats. When the team is engaged, they will make better decisions. And for evidence of that, I would look to your own experience. How much better are the results of the meetings that you are in where you are engaged versus the ones where you were feeling checked out and bored? Likely, it is a world of difference. That said, stoking the flames of conflict can all come crashing down if you don't have that first foundation of trust built in. A team that lacks trust can suffer from numerous shortcomings that make it impossible to engage in productive debate. And I'm going to talk about why that is. But first, I want to say what trust looks like on a team, because I think that that's kind of like a key thing to be able to look at and examine. So a lack of trust can look like a couple of things. It can look like people blaming each other and becoming frustrated or angry with each other often. It can look like reactivity, and it can look like a lot of stress or annoyance on the team, people rolling their eyes and not being fully open with each other. It can also look like people not wanting to be seen as wrong or not admit to any of their shortcomings, really having a tough time owning up to that stuff. Often there's a focus on the self and individual performance and false attributions for teammates' behavior, thinking that people are doing things because they want to undermine you, or they're trying to they're trying to hurt you in some way. So a lot of like politics and positioning start to play in when that begins to happen. People will also be forceful in their communications, not necessarily winning each other over, but just saying, just do it because I say so. And then follow through on that tends to be mixed because nobody likes to be told what to do if they don't agree with it. Conversations in the whole will probably make people feel bad and result in things like power struggles. Things can feel very unresolved after that. But just to look deeper, what is actually causing all of that to surface? Well, it's because things can get very personal in a conflict situation. That's what makes it uncomfortable. People are attached to their ideas. So when they put something forward, say, if I said to you, hey, I'm sorry, Sally, but I just don't think that your marketing plan is very good. well, that's going to feel bad to be criticized with what you're putting forward. And you might feel the need to defend that and defend your choices. A team that has a healthy amount of trust, though, can take that. They can hear that the marketing plan is not very good, not as a personal attack, but as a criticism of the plan. And then they can become open to debate the merits of the ideas itself. Ideological debate is the foundation of productive conflict. Those great debates where you're debating about something that you both care about and you're clear that none of it is personal. You're just trying to get to the truth, whatever the best result is. Basically, can the decisions of the team hold up to the application of reason and logic from the individuals? Why trust is so essential for this is because in that moment of like discomfort that we might feel when someone shoots down our idea or criticizes how we're doing things, when we trust someone, we know that that someone has our best interests at heart. And we are more open to hearing hard truths from them because we can let our guard down. We let our guard down because we trust them. It's not necessarily easy to let down your walls, but it is essential to be able to do that. So things that you might see in a healthy or productive situation would look like people who are passionate and engaged and people who are willing to reconsider their positions. You want folks who are listening to the points that are being made and thinking about, well, how does that stand up to what I'm saying? And looking to reconsider where their stance is. That's productive. Listening to understand, and critically, nobody is trying to protect their self-image. Nobody's trying to protect who they are. This may seem like a perfect scenario, but it is possible to achieve this on teams, not all the time, but quite frequently. Let's see. Yeah, so that is that. And critically, there's nothing held back. Once the discussion is over, everyone has the feeling that they have said what they need to. And when the team fully commits to their decision at the end of it, there can be a feeling of what I talked about in terms of alignment on the team, genuine alignment, because everything has been heard and considered in one form or another. It makes it much easier, in my experience, to see like a team commit to their decisions that way. So the second tool is ensure a basis of trust. Whoops. It's being weird. All right. Ensure a basis of trust in your team. That means mutual good intentions, and that means creating a space where everybody feels relatively safe for that. For a more detailed dive into this topic and how to create trust, I would recommend going to YouTube and searching one of our other webinars on trust specifically, where we do a dive into that dysfunction. So if you go to YouTube, type in Expium and trust, you should see a couple of options pop up there. And that can let you go into some useful tools for being able to do that, that don't necessarily take a lot of time and that can start to crack open your team. I talk about the dysfunctions though in the beginning of that video, so you might want to skip ahead a bit. Something to be aware of as a leader is just that the goal of an argument is not that one side gets their way, but that both sides come to a deeper understanding of the issue at hand and come up with a better solution because of it. So if as a leader, you want to look in yourself and see if you don't trust your team, you might use authority to get your ideas through. Like, we're just going to do this because I say so. It doesn't matter who's right or wrong. We're just going to go ahead and this is what we're going to do. If that's what happens, it can cost your team. Because I say so becomes the justification, and team members start to feel there can be a grating or a frustration, and your ideas might not be fulfilled with as much gusto as if folks had been actually bought in on the decision and allowed to participate in it. The buy-in is really the key cost that you're missing by doing that, because people's perspectives weren't considered. And ultimately, they might also learn that they're not allowed to speak up. And so over time, you lose the benefit of their perspectives as they become resigned that you don't even want to hear it. So that can be the case. And many team members, I'm sure, have experienced past work where that has been the case. That is a common work situation to be in. And so many of us have been trained over time to not speak up. And even in an environment that's perfectly healthy, folks might feel uncomfortable speaking up. So as a leader, you might even sense that something is wrong, but the person won't tell you, which leads me to our third tool, which is dig up buried conflict. Mining for conflict is another way of calling it, but it's your job that if something is unspoken on the team, to get to the bottom of things and ask questions. Now, to be clear, you're not looking to make problems where there aren't any. You're not looking to dig up dirt. Your job is to make sure that everyone's on board and that all of the ideas have been considered. Letting people pretend that there is not an issue when there is going to cost your team when down the line they finally get the courage to bring it up, and either you can't do anything about it because the project has moved on, or you have to rework your project if you agree with what they have to say. At the very least, it's going to cost you 2 weeks of that employee fuming and possibly being difficult in meetings, or who knows what could be the problem there. So your job as a leader is to make sure to ask if you sense that there's something wrong and give them permission to talk about it. Remind everyone that you have the same goal, and hearing everyone's opinion about how to get to that goal is useful and something that you value. Telling your team that you value their opinions and their disagreements will make a world of difference. And remind them that this conflict exists because everyone wants the product to succeed. That's why you feel strongly about it, because you want to see it go well, and everyone can get on board with that. I don't have a slide for this, but when they do finally have the comfort to speak up and say something, make sure to validate them. When someone brings up a valid conflict and the team starts to engage in that debate, they might feel uncomfortable, especially if they're not used to it. So as a leader, you can just tell them, hey, this is really great. I appreciate hearing both of your points of view. Please continue. Something like that can bring relief to a group that is engaging in this. And it's funny, I sometimes wonder, I'm like, oh, we're all adults here, like everyone can say their point of view and all that, but it's been nice in the past to see when I do say that, to see folks feel relief over having engaged on a subject that was uncomfortable to them, and felt more bought in ultimately when we went forward with our decisions. So yeah, that's what you want. You ultimately want your folks to be able to confidently debate whatever points they have, and know that they're in line. I've found that on the whole, folks just want to treat each other well. They just need to be given some tools and some encouragement and some room to learn and practice and do the thing. The point is kind of to make it a safe place for people to fail and pick themselves up again and try things out. That's not always possible in a more high stakes world where there's deadlines and a lot of money riding on our decisions, and that can feel really scary. So it can be a hard hurdle as a team member, team leader, to be able to create that sort of safety with group. So for what it's worth, if you'd like to go deeper with me on that subject, or any of the ones that we've raised so far, you can feel free to set up a call with me. I'll go over how to do that at the end of the whole thing. But I really enjoy working with teams on these issues, and I'm happy to free up some time to hear about what's going on with your particular team and offer whatever insights I have. We're all about providing value here. So to go back to what I was saying, providing a safe space. So we here at Expium really value the soft skills, the skills like empathy, the skills like trust, and like productive conflict. And we believe that they're incredibly important in dealing with our clients, in dealing with our partners, and in dealing with our own internal colleagues. The lack we found of those skills creates unnecessary conflict. It walls people off from one another, which can cause a host of problems. And it can even cause bottlenecks when people are unwilling to engage with each other. It means that they're just not gonna share very effectively with each other. And that ends up being a bottleneck in our process. So we devised a low stakes environment to start to practice these things. We started this in our off hours, but have now moved it into something that we do with the team actively on like Fridays at the end of the day. So it's called Dungeons and Dragons. So Dungeons and Dragons is well, it's kind of like a board game. It's there's a movie that recently came out from the makers of Dungeons and Dragons with Chris Pine in it, some other sweet actors. And this was featured in Stranger Things. It's kind of a piece of the 80s that has carried on. But at the end of the day, it's a board game, but it's not really like any board game that people have played before, because it mostly exists in the imagination. It's mostly a storytelling game where one player acts as the narrator and builds an imaginary world, and the rest of the people move through it as a different character, either like a fighter or a wizard or something like that. And it mostly exists just in language, in story, and there are rules. There's like dice for fighting monsters and things that you might encounter along the way, and sometimes you'll use maps and miniatures and things like that to help bring it to life. Kind of an example of what it might look like using this image here would be the game master would describe you're in a stone crypt, and you've traveled down here. It's been a long journey down into the dark, and you can feel your torches burning brightly and casting shadows all around you. You come to a big empty room, and then down a hallway, on the far side of the room, you start to hear the sound of footsteps, huge moving footsteps of a great creature, and you can see this reddish glow coming from down the hallway. At this point, the players might start to react and be like, oh my God, oh, it's probably the dragon that lives down here. Oh, what should we do? And one of them might say like, I want my character to hide behind a pillar, for example. And the dungeon master is like, great, all right, you hide behind a pillar. And then the one with the shield might be like, I prepare my shield and ready for when the dragon comes around the corner. And then you keep on playing, and the dragon would arrive and breathe fire or whatever. The story would kind of continue from there. But it functions like that. It's very much just a conversation where one person is narrating the world and everyone else is making decisions. What's really cool about it that we found is because it's mostly a conversation, it helps us practice a lot of these soft skills that we care about. It's fun. And although the setting is imaginary and the experience is imaginary, the feelings tend to be very real. The sense of excitement or the sense of loss that a team feels when they fail to perform in some way, or the fear that they might feel as their character is put in danger, it's the human imagination is a very powerful thing. Much like our dreams or other areas of life where we use our imagination, maybe imagining a vacation that will go on, that tends to affect us physically or emotionally in some way as we're, put in the situation and forced to make decisions. So that can be a really cool aspect of the game. And that's what kind of makes it this, it's both a low stakes environment where it's all imaginary and nothing matters, but it feels high stakes. It feels like it matters, which in a way simulates a lot of the stuff that we deal with on a day-to-day situation internally with clients, etc. So let's see, what else do I want to say about this? Yeah. Well, in my opinion, there's really nothing better than like the whirlwind of laughter and creativity that can result from a team playing together. They can be inventive, learn to trust their instincts, surprise each other with different contributions, and get invested in the story that they play, because the story continues session after session, their decisions build on each other and their consequences of each decision spills out. And it can stimulate this great sense of purpose where the people playing feel like they're looking to achieve a goal within the story. And it's often self-directed because it's open-ended. It's not like you have to do a particular thing. It's an open-ended game and you can go wherever you want. What people who are unfamiliar with the game will think that it's kind of like an unscripted or a choose your own adventure, like a book, where you can either go one way or the other. But the truth is that the book, it's not the same. It's not like you can only turn to page 36 and go to the attic, or turn to page 90 and go to the basement. You can also go to the kitchen. You can go look underneath the floorboards. You can call the cops. I don't know, whatever you would kind of believably be able to do. And that's because instead of having a book, you have this person who acts as a game master, and their job is just to respond to the player's choices and give you an opportunity to make believable choices in the scenario and then put interesting consequences in. So the key is that every choice has a consequence and there's no starting over or going back. If someone dies in the battle against the dragon, they're gone. Their character's dead and the party's going to have to deal with that. Maybe the player will get a new character, but in the story, that person still died, and that might leave an impact and might make them make different decisions in the future. It's really where the fun of the game starts to go, because as the group moves towards their objective, the world reacts, time passes, things happen in other areas where the players didn't put their attention. And okay, well, this dragon snare is more of a taste. I would love to show you a demo of our tool and show you more of what a full-blown adventure looks like. So I'm going to jump into that. So I'm going to say goodbye to this. I'm going to jump over here. So we use Confluence for our space here to showcase our kind of to use this as a common repository of knowledge. And we've got a couple of different areas over here. So when folks are first introduced to this, we'll go over the game mechanics. This is pretty much just to say how it works. We start with the social roles, but then we talk about how the dice work and how rolling works. Some people worry that this can be really complicated, but it is not actually a terribly complicated system. We have kind of pulled out a lot of stuff that we think is extraneous and boiled it down to the essentials of what makes the game fun and just created that. So we have the mechanics. We also use a working agreement. The game is totally fictional and it's in our imagination, but it's important that there be boundaries in that, things that are okay and not okay. For example, we wouldn't want any kind of romance or sexual situations to show up because this is a work environment. That's just not what this is for. So that's something that we would say is totally off the table on this. Similarly, things like torture or whatever in the story, we would put off the table, and that helps us keep kind of a safe boundary. And here we have some tools for when players might want to introduce new boundaries or just giving them a feel for what the basics are. And this group actually here are some of my favorite people. These are people who play role-playing games together on YouTube. And they're a group of voice actors in LA, and they are just terrific friends and great storytellers. It's really awesome to watch them. We also have characters. Everyone who plays will get to pick their character, and we have this little list that they get to choose from. This is an example of kind of a character sheet that folks get. You can see it's got like the name, a little bit about like who and what they are, and then some tools to help it when you're playing the character and making decisions for them, like a belief, their family background, and a motivation that might drive them, as well as a short history of who they are and how they got into the situation. And then down here, just we have some abilities, their hit points, and kind of their different skills and equipment. These bonuses will help you when you roll the dice. The higher your bonuses, the better you are. And they each apply to different kinds of situations. So things that involve strength, this character is kind of average to not so good at. Whereas things that involve their wisdom and their awareness is something that they're very good at. So you can choose a character that seems like fun for you to play. In this scenario, All of the characters are members of a military, like a mercenary organization that travels across the world and participates in conflicts. And their main goal is money, order, and power. So that's kind of who you play in this adventure. And they're called the Flaming Fist, and the story takes place in a jungle that they've landed on, a place called Chult, which is like this imaginary jungle continent with dinosaurs and other creatures. And they have landed there to kind of strip the continent of whatever resources they can and make money. So there will be some twists and turns along the way for sure. This is a map of Chult, kind of a big map. But the mission of this is really clear. And just to bring it back to what we were talking about earlier, the premise of this is intended to create conflict. It is very intentional in that way. So the story begins with you all as players being called into the High Commander's office of the forces here on Chult. And she explains to you that the reason that you're all here today, well, the reason that their forces are there at all is to make money. That there's no other, she doesn't want you to have any illusions about what matters, and that if they fail to do that, then we'll return home, you might lose your position or your rank, and the Flaming Fist is going to suffer for it. You might find yourself on a worse job somewhere else. She then explains how a commander of their forces went up one of the rivers in this jungle about a year ago in search of diamonds, and has been up there for almost a year, and he has so far shown no results. And anytime he's called to be held to account for that, he refuses out of hand and says he's busy dealing with other issues. And she is really concerned about him. And so your job as a group is to infiltrate his regiment, find out what's going wrong up there, and put a stop to it if he is endangering the interests of the Flaming Fist. That is the kind of essential goal of this mission. And what's amazing is that this game is totally open-ended. So after being given that premise, each group of players gets to decide how they specifically want to approach it. They can, the options are many, but for example, do they go with a cover story or not when they head up the river is kind of a key question. And so do you go with a cover, like a cover story? If you do, what is that cover story? If you head to this guy's encampment, head all the way down the river and track him down, and say that you're a bunch of explorers who were lost, well, that's going to produce a different situation than if you go in totally openly and say, hey, the boss wants to know what you're doing. Tell me what's happening out here. Both of those situations might result in slightly different sets of challenges, circumstances, and consequences. So what ends up being very interesting is teams talking amongst themselves and making a decision about how they want to approach the situation that's been handed to them. If they end up planning well, gathering lots of important information, it can have a huge win for their team. But often, the dynamics that are already in place with a group of people start to show up. Who are the folks who tend to dominate the conversation? Who doesn't get heard as much? Who has the good ideas that are ignored? Who tends to bowl people over? Is the team just generally quiet and feels uncomfortable voicing their opinions? How safe do they feel with humor? Are they fun with each other? Do they make each other laugh and feel good? Or are they more critical in how they talk to each other? all of that stuff that happens elsewhere happens right here in the game. And it's interesting to see how they approach it, because teams with good communication, I find, can often punch way above their weight class and accomplish much more than their skills and abilities would seem like it's possible to do. And teams that have poor communication will tend to be routed by challenges that they could easily overcome because they're not able to properly align with each other. And I think that's part of what makes this such a useful tool, because unlike in a video game, there are no preset solutions here or preset paths. There are boundaries for sure of what's possible and what's not, but there's not only a specific set of things. And the game is driven by the consequences of each character's actions. So this leads to meaningful choices for them and of their ability to guide their own destiny. Empowerment ends up being felt by a team. And if your team practices agile, that is something you want to cultivate as hard as you can, being their coach or leader, because self-directed action starts to have impacts on the team's performance. They feel that they can go forward and do and perform as a unit. Their confidence in the team increases when they do actually feel self-directed. We also have retro conversations at the end of these adventures for teams to talk about what did and didn't go well, so they can start to address these issues, like who speaks the most, who doesn't get heard, or how the team comes to decisions. So I'll work with each team to help them have those conversations and ensure that they are productive and empowering for the team. It can be difficult stuff to face, but there's no reason, I think, to get stuck in the heaviness of it. The point is that you're always marching towards becoming a better and better team. What's really cool about this whole thing is it offers the people who play a chance to make a difference in the story, kind of like a movie where you can actually influence the results of your plot. So if you say, don't go in there, they actually won't go in there. And teams walk away having honed their communication skills and their ability to coordinate as a team. And the meaningful choices are what produce passionate debate, what we talked about earlier. Passionate, open debate of which choice to pursue, or perhaps if there's some plan of action that will allow them to achieve everything, perhaps by taking on some risk. This allows for creativity, and it teaches teams to kind of embrace that conflict in a space where their decisions are not going to have disastrous consequences for the company. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to share about that and the tool. There's lots of cool stuff. Oh, I didn't go down. You couldn't see the key. There's a little key to this map so you can see what the different sort of points on it mean, which is super neat. All right, we'll jump back in here and wrap up because we are getting close to time. Oh, here's a little image of the jungle. Great, experiential learning. So yeah, what I personally love about this as a method, and with other methods that are similar, is that people end up learning by experience. They end up learning by doing and throwing themselves into a situation and build that muscle memory of how to do a thing. And what's great about this is that this is really, in a lot of ways, how we learn as human beings. From a very young age, when we're learning how to talk, how to walk, how to go to school, how to deal with our feelings, how to deal with crushes, all sorts of stuff. We learn mostly by doing. There's only a slim part of our life where what we learn is by taking in information and then regurgitating it on a test, which is kind of the traditional method that's taught in schools. We call that informative learning. I don't personally think there's anything wrong with informative learning. It's a critical skill. It's how we build lots of important things, especially in our workplace. So informative learning is very important. But I do want to make this distinct from experiential learning, which is what we do here. Teams get to learn by doing, and critically, you will do, and then you'll reflect afterwards on how that went and make adjustments. It's pretty similar actually to the sprint and retro system that's built into Agile. Teams can start to make connections and learn how to do it faster and better, and often without having to think about it as much. Over time, you internalize what you're learning there and just naturally feel that you're growing as a person in these skills, and teams can have breakthroughs and really have leaps and strides in how they're getting better as a team. So that's kind of what we do here, and what we think is one of the best methods for teaching alongside other avenues. So that is what I wanted to say about that, and I think that's it. If you are interested at all in scheduling a package with us, you can go online on expium.com. I'll show you how, and request a package. You'll get a consultation call, and then we'll schedule something. Players who or companies who purchase this, all of their players will receive a box with goodies in it, including dice and other things. At the beginning of the game, we'll do introductions for us as individuals, how the game works, kind of everything I showed you on the Confluence space. And then there's a couple of different options in terms of length. You can do 3 half-day sessions that can either all be, over a 3-day period, or they can be kind of once every 2 weeks or once every week, depending on your cadence. Or you can do a single half-day session if you want, which is just a shorter story. It has less of an expansive scope than the one I was showing you earlier with heading up the river after the commander. It'll tend to be more focused. Or if you're just curious about kind of what this feels like and what it'd feel like to do it, we also have a 1-hour option for folks to do a lunch and learn with us. And this can be for groups of up to 12 people. And that's how that works. So if you're interested in booking, that's kind of an idea of what it works. But each one is basically an exercise at the top. I may also talk about some concepts like trust or conflict as well. And then we'll play and do a retrospective. And that's it. For us as a company, we do training. As I said, Jira Bootcamp and Confluence Bootcamp are kind of our flagship services, but we also do Jira Service Management and plenty of other Atlassian tools. Pretty much if it's an Atlassian tool, we have something to say about it. We also do personal consulting for strategy or implementation of different tools. And lastly, we do custom development to create solutions that may not exist, integrations using the API, custom front ends. It's really awesome. This is an up-to-date list of webinars. Great. So this is our current list. If you want to register for any of these, I'll show you how in a second. We are just working our way through it right now. Yeah, we're on May 16th. All right, conflict one got moved. But anyway, there's going to be success stories over wine with Jira Align, which we're really excited for, and a handful of other ones. So I'll show you how to do that in a second. Actually, let's go do that now. So if you want to register, go to expium.com and click on training. And you can follow here. Anything in blue is a free webinar for you to attend if you're looking to get some useful benefits. We, again, are all about providing value here. So if it's learning more about Confluence or Jira Align or anything, strongly recommend checking out one of those free webinars. And then these green ones are our paid classes. And here's the up-to-date area where you can click sign up or buy tickets for any of these. And if you're interested in booking a call with me, you'd click on the Find Out More section and fill it out. And the message just let them know that you're interested in team building and click on training. And then you can do that. All right, that is it for today. I'm going to check and see if we have any questions or things that popped up. Nope. OK, looks like we're good. Thank you all for participating today and coming. It's been a pleasure being able to share this with you. I am Joshua Selesnik. You can find me at joshua.selesnik at expium.com if you want to reach me. You can also go on my LinkedIn and friend me there. I really enjoy connecting with folks there and post and talk about these things. And that's it. So thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next time and hope to hear from you soon.